it's Kira and welcome back to another vlog. Today is the Friday of Easter weekend, which means that I have a 4-day weekend, 4 days off work, and if you've watched any of my vlogs before around bank holidays, you will know that I cherish bank holidays. I love having time off work, as I think most people do, but I think that there is just something extra special about like an extended weekend, whereas like when you've had to book a day off or book like a week off holiday, yeah, that is great, but it doesn't feel quite as exciting as just like getting a cheeky extra day off here and there. And Easter weekend happens to be one of my favourites because you get an extra Friday off and an extra Monday, and a 4-day weekend is something to be celebrated. So I am very excited about Easter weekend, and that isn't even considering the fact that Easter is all about chocolate. So I'm very excited for all of the vegan chocolate that I'll get to eat this weekend as well. But for now it is just Friday, so I'm not cracking open any Easter eggs just yet, no pun intended. But I am about to tell you what I'm going to be reading this weekend, because since I do have a long weekend ahead of me, it seems only right to start a new book and make the most of that extra time for reading. So based on my last vlog, which was actually not a vlog, my last video, which was my like full TBR video, obviously there were loads of books in that video, and a couple of people recommended specifically that I start with this one, which is Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. And whenever I read Coco Mellors, I always in my head think it says Coco Melons because of the kids show, which I always hear on TikTok, but I've never actually seen it because I'm definitely way too old for that. But that aside, Coco Mellors always in my mind is Coco Melon. But anyway, Cleopatra and Frankenstein is the book that I'm going to be reading next. It is the newest addition to my bookshelves, recommended to me by my friend Em, who always gives great book recommendations, but also in the comments there seemed to be most people were saying that this was a great book and that I should definitely read it, and someone specifically requested that it gets its own reading vlog, which of course is coming right now. There was one comment where someone said that they couldn't even make it through this entire book, so I'm interested to see where I sit on the spectrum of enjoying this book. Fingers crossed that's the experience I have, but there is only one way to find out, and I'm very much looking forward to diving into this one. I also feel like it's just such a beautiful book cover, and like I just love the little details of the like royal blue and the like pastel pink. I just think it's really, really nice. But for anyone who doesn't know what this book is about, because to be honest I don't know a lot about it either, we'll read the blurb. So it says, New York is slipping from Cleo's grasp, 24 at a different party every night and with a student visa that's swiftly running out. She doesn't even have money for cigarettes. But then a chance encounter on New Year's Eve offers her a way out. Frank, successful and 20 years older, can give her the security she craves and the green card she needs. And in Cleo, he sees a life filled with beauty, art and freedom. As the two rush headlong into an impulsive marriage and their friends are drawn into a tumultuous orbit, what began as a chance meeting will change all their lives forever. Do you know, that sounds actually so... Em said it was kind of like Sally Rooney-esque, as well as slightly referencing A Little Life, potentially maybe because of the like New York City setting. But to me that kind of reminds me of Exciting Times by Nisha Dolan, which is the book about an Irish expat who finds herself teaching English in Hong Kong, and then she ends up like drawn into this relationship with a much older man, and then also ends up in like a love triangle with another woman as well. So it's very interesting, and I really liked that book because I feel like it just had so many things going on. So from that blurb alone, I think this book is definitely going to be a winner for me, and I'm very excited to get started on it. But for now, as always seems to be the case whenever I start a new vlog, I'm about to head out to go and get some coffee, and then this afternoon me and Jay are going out to like an ice cream place with his mum, because she got some ice cream from there the other day and said it was incredible. It is mostly dairy ice cream, which is no good for me as a vegan, but I looked on their website and they do have a few fruit sorbets, and today is a beautiful sunny day, perfect for sorbet. So that's how we're kicking off Easter weekend, and I'll catch up with you in a little bit with some reading. So it's actually now Saturday afternoon, and yesterday I did make a start on reading Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I only read 2 chapters, which I think was probably about, yeah, it was about 25 pages-ish, so just a very brief start. But what I read was really, really nice, because I feel like what I liked about the writing style of this book was that it starts with this chance meeting between the 2 main characters, Cleo and Frank, and because it's just like so sudden, it kind of just drops you into this conversation, and the characters just suddenly like sort of have a spark with each other and hit it off straight away. It feels like you as a reader also are kind of dropped into this very like easy circumstance where you feel like you know all of the characters really well, even though you've literally only just started reading the book. So it feels very much like you are just dropped into the action and you just pick up on it straight away, and it just felt like a really easy start to a book. But today we weren't expecting it to be a nice day at all. We only thought Friday was going to be sunny, but it's actually really beautiful. So I had a few plans this morning, but this afternoon nothing on the agenda. So me and Jay are driving off to Bolton Abbey to go and sit by the river. We've both brought our books. We're going to do some reading and just basically enjoy an unexpected afternoon of sunshine. When we looked at the weather for this weekend, it looked like it was going to be absolutely rubbish. So I anticipated a weekend of pretty much just staying at home, except for Friday, which is the one day that was meant to be sunny. But it's now Sunday, and we ended up spending so much time outside the last few days. I have done like nearly 20,000 steps today. And I think the last couple of days, Friday and Saturday, I ended up doing more than 20,000 steps. Just checking my Garmin app to see if that's true or not. But yeah, it's ended up being such a wonderful weekend, which I absolutely cannot complain about. And I always love spending time outside when it's nice weather. And I do think, like, I always dance between which of the seasons is my favourite. Winter is categorically my least favourite, but I'm here and there between spring, summer and autumn, because I feel like they all have elements that are just lovely and that I really enjoy about all 3 seasons. But I think spring is probably the season that is most highly anticipated and feels the most welcome when it arrives, because you just can't wait for winter to be over. And so when spring finally arrives, it just feels like such a treat, and this weekend has been a perfect example of that, because it's just been like sunny. Today is the least sunny of the days. It's quite cloudy actually, but it's still really nice and mild outside, and it's just nice to be able to go outside without feeling as though you are going to freeze to death if you spend more than 5 minutes exposed to the elements. So that's this weekend, and I feel like it's been, yeah, going by a lot quicker because we've ended up with way more to do than we anticipated. But one thing that I have been trying to focus my attention on is of course this book, which I'm really, really enjoying. Yesterday reading by the river was so nice, and I ended up making my way to just over 100 pages through this book. And I feel like, as is the case with a lot of literary fictions, I always struggle to put my finger on exactly what I enjoy about the book, because in reality a lot of what is happening is just very like commonplace. It's all about real life, real experiences, real relationships, real connections, and so there is no like one key thing that makes it like so exciting, like you would have obviously in like a thriller or a fantasy where there is like a real hook to the plot. I feel like these books are a lot more meandering, but there is just something about certain contemporary novels like this one where the way that the characters are introduced to you and the way that you see them kind of like orbiting around each other in the book just makes it so like captivating. And I think there is an element of it being like relatable and recognisable to real life, but also different enough from your own life to be interesting enough to read about, that just makes books like this so intriguing, to me at least, and I personally really enjoy them. Now of course this one being called Cleopatra and Frankenstein kind of gives away the fact that the two main characters are obviously where the book is predominantly focusing, but what I enjoy about this book, and that kind of reminds me of Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, is that we have like our main character. So obviously in Conversations with Friends, that is Frances, and she is like the centre of this world's kind of like ongoings, and everything that you see is kind of through that lens. So most of what we're seeing is through the lens of either being connected to Cleo or Frank, but we're getting introduced to lots of their like connections. So specifically we are getting to know Quentin, who is Cleo's best friend, and then Zoe, who is Frank's younger sister, and we're getting to know these other side characters quite well, and I'm intrigued to see like how their role will unfold as the book goes on. But I really like books like that where you do have your main character, but also I feel like the world becomes a lot richer when you get to know their like connections a lot deeper as well. They're not just like side characters, they become like people in and of their own right when you get to know them a little bit deeper, and we've had perspectives just from them, so like chapters that have just focused on Zoe and chapters that have just focused on Quentin, and I feel like that's quite nice because it allows you to sort of see them as a main character at certain points in the novel rather than just seeing them as a side connection to your main characters. Don't know if that makes any sense, but for me I feel like it adds to the book, and it makes that, even though I'm only probably about maybe a third of the way through, it means that I feel like I know the world a lot better already because you're getting to know the characters in more depth, and I feel like that kind of accelerates your experience with the book. So all that rambling to say, I'm really enjoying this book. It is now Sunday afternoon, Easter Sunday, so the chocolate has officially been opened and we've just been out for a walk. So now that we are home, I think I'm just going to spend the rest of the afternoon underneath a blanket on the sofa with a coffee and getting on with some more reading. A weekend of what can only be described as incredible weather, today had to be the day where it just went crashing down. So me and Jay went out for our final walk of Easter weekend, and it started out quite nice, but the rain soon came and we ended up with a 4-mile walk. By the end we were both absolutely soaked to the skin. I don't know if it really shows on here, but all of my clothes are like the wrong shade of whatever colour they are because they got so wet, and I'm also covered in mud on my legs. But it was a lovely walk, and I think we worked out that I think I maybe totted up about 18 miles of walking this weekend, and Jay ended up doing a walk on his own on Friday while I was out for coffee, so he ended up with maybe like just over 20 miles of walking. So not bad for an Easter weekend, but since it is the final afternoon of the weekend before heading back for a week of work, my aim of the game is to finish this book. I'm currently just shy of 200 pages in, which means I've got about a third of the book left. We have no plans on this afternoon aside from getting the heaters on, putting on some cosy clothes, drinking lots of tea and getting reading done. So I think even though it is a good chunk of the book still left, it's definitely possible if I just knuckle down and don't get distracted by TikTok to finish it today. And I'm very intrigued to see where it goes because obviously the main characters that we have, Cleo and Frank rather, They are like an unconventional romance, and the blurb kind of describes that they meet and they have this whirlwind romance that ends up in like an early marriage, because Cleo otherwise would end up having to come back to the UK instead of staying in America. So they end up getting married probably a lot speedier than they would have done otherwise. And then I think because of that, we have this circumstance where they're still very much in the getting to know each other stages of their relationship, whilst also having taken like a really serious step into like a marriage. So it's really interesting to see those cracks kind of starting to show. And it's interesting because they have very different roles within the relationship, in the sense that Frank is quite a lot older than Cleo, and therefore he definitely takes on the financial provider kind of role in the relationship, and at times kind of holds that over Cleo, who has a like less age on her side and therefore less experience, and has less time to have actually like made her way into a career where she can be a lot more financially stable. But B, she's also like an artist, so in general is in a less financially stable career than Frank is in. So there's a definite imbalance in the relationship there. But then when it comes to their like emotional maturity, Cleo is definitely taking like the, I guess, like the bulk of the emotional work in the relationship, and Frank kind of avoids his problems and largely ends up sort of drowning his sorrows in alcohol. So it's interesting to see how, now that they're getting to know each other, those cracks are kind of showing. And I don't want to give any spoilers away, but the chapter that I just finished before finishing reading last night honestly made me feel a little bit sick, because all I'll say is that it involved an animal, and as an animal lover and a vegan, I just found it like stomach churning how the chapter ended. It was genuinely like the most traumatic thing I've read in a while. It made me actually quite upset, so that's why I stopped reading last night. But I'm ready to get back on the horse and start reading again today, so gonna change out of my wet clothes and then get right on with some reading. Makeup on since Friday because all we've been doing is going out for walks, but I feel like my face has progressively gotten A, frecklier and frecklier the more days that we've spent outside, and B, tireder and tireder as the weekend has gone on. So I don't really look my best, but I'm still considering this weekend an absolute Easter success. First of all, just because we've had the most lovely 4 days, and second of all, because I set one and only one goal for this weekend, and that was of course to start and finish reading Cleopatra and Frankenstein, and this afternoon I just managed to do that, and it was such a great read, and exactly the kind of book that I think is best enjoyed read within like a really short time frame, because it is very jumpy. Like I was talking about yesterday, how we have obviously got these two main characters who are definitely like the epicenter of the entire novel, but we also get perspectives and chapters from various different people who exist in their lives, and because of that and the fact that not all of those like I guess chapters are necessarily like progressing the plot, they're more so just giving you extra character context, if that makes any sense. It would mean that if I was reading this book over a longer period of time, I feel like I would find it a lot harder to fully immerse myself in the novel, and I probably wouldn't appreciate it as much. But reading it just over the course of like 4 days meant that I never kind of took myself out of the story too much, and so it was really easy to pick up each time I opened the book again, and I just really enjoyed it. There was, as I think is always the case with chapters that are given like multiple different perspectives, there was one perspective that I wasn't as keen on compared to the rest of the book, but even that was still fairly interesting. I just felt like this one character had a few different chapters where it was written in a slightly different style to the rest of the novel, and the chapters were also like really, really long, and I just felt like I had that feeling of having those one chapters where you just feel like, oh, I kind of wish that we could get back to the rest of the characters, if that makes sense. And that for me is just always commonplace with books where you do have those different chapters from each character's perspective. But on the whole, I found it to be a really enjoyable book to read, and very, very similar in style, I would say, to Sally Rooney, in the sense that we just have this like almost like snapshot into characters' lives, and the entirety of the book only takes place over the course of like a year and a half, so it's only a short time in these characters' lives, and yet you feel like you get to see so much happening, and I just really enjoyed it. And the ending in particular gave me such Sally Rooney vibes, particularly Normal People, in the way that it ended, in a way that was kind of like satisfying but also very melancholic, and nothing terrible happened, but also you just feel kind of sad for the characters, but also like they've reached a natural conclusion for them, and it's just like a real mix of emotions as a reader. And there was a quote that I just thought was really nice, or not necessarily a quote but a description at the end, where the two main characters were talking to each other about the bird starlings who form these like murmurations where they like fly, and it's almost like when you see those schools of fish where they all kind of like move in unison with each other. And Cleo is basically saying how each starling is only aware of the 5 birds directly surrounding it, so above, below, left, right, back and forth. And so even though they're moving in like a group of huge amounts of birds, and they can just like see, as a viewer you can kind of see this like incredible collection of characters all moving together if you were watching a murmuration of starlings, and it is an incredible thing to watch. But the birds themselves are only aware of like their closest circle, and yet somehow it all connects and creates this incredible tapestry. And they liken that to like your life, essentially, how you as a human kind of have your 5 connections, but each of your people in your 5 connections will have their own 5 connections, and gradually that kind of builds up this massive connecting tapestry of humans who are all living in unison with each other, but they're not all necessarily aware of their connection like by default. And I don't know if that makes any sense, I've probably described it terribly, but I felt like it was a really like a very moving way to conclude the novel, and just to show that people have like a bigger impact than they realise on the people that are around them, and I really enjoyed it. Another thing that I really liked at the end, just to conclude, was a funny little nod to like a thing that I didn't realise was just something that we do in the UK. Let me know if anyone else does it, but they were talking about how Cleo introduced Frank. So Cleo is from England and Frank is obviously from America, and she introduced him to a pinch punch situation, which is basically in the UK, or at least for me and Jay anyway, we always do on the first of the month, pinch punch, first of the month, no returns, and each month is like a battle to get there first because you want to be the one to pinch punch. And they were just talking about how she introduced that to Frank, and I thought that was like a funny little quirk of the character, which I absolutely love because it's something that we do, and it's always a battle to get there first. I always feel so mortally offended if Jay manages to pinch punch me before I pinch punch him, but either way I was just interested to find out that that was like a UK thing. I didn't realise that, but it was a fun thing to find out, and a nice little way to brighten what was at times like quite a heavy read. So yeah, really enjoyed this book. I've babbled on about it for ages now, but it was absolutely worth a read, and I can only thank Em for finally encouraging me to pick it up after seeing it on TikTok and Instagram so many times. She told me to get it while I was in Waterstones with her. I did, and it was incredible. So I haven't read many books this year, but each book that I have read has been really good. So I'm having a great reading year, although not great in terms of quantity, but quality is so there. And that, I think, will bring my Easter weekend vlog to an end, since I have achieved the only goal that I set for myself this weekend. So if you've read this book, I'd love to know what you thought of it, and if not, maybe I've recommended it to you and inspired you to pick it up, because I definitely think it's worth a read, especially for fans of Sally Rooney. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.